Since I coach senior executives and aspiring senior executives, I get asked about this topic of executive presence all the time. In fact, I'd say that over the last year, I've noticed a real uptick in clients seeking guidance on how to establish the all-elusive executive presence. Sometimes they're being proactive, but sometimes this high-potential leader is sent to me by their HR manager, and they'll tell me something like, this person has all the check marks for the C-suite, but they really need to demonstrate executive presence. And by the way, I always tell the person, this is very good news. Your employer thinks you have what it takes and they're investing in you. Anyway, as I said, I've definitely noticed an uptick in requests for coaching on executive presence. But I have to tell you something else. I've also noticed increased pushback associated with this term. Welcome to the Talk About Talk podcast. My name is Dr. Andrea Wojnicki, and I'm your executive communication coach. Please just call me Andrea. I'm here to help you improve your communication skills so that you can achieve your career goals. In addition to this bi-weekly Talk About Talk podcast, you can learn more from me through the workshops, keynotes, and masterclasses that I run, plus private coaching and a growing library of on-demand online courses. You can learn more about everything we offer at Talk About Talk by checking out the website at talkabouttalk.com. You can even set up a consult with me there. Check it out, talkabouttalk.com. Okay, let's talk executive presence. Executive presence is one of those things that might be tough to define, but you know it when you see it. Am I right? The professionals that I coach tell me that it's all about confidence, feeling, and more importantly, being perceived as confident, but of course, not arrogant. And executive presence is necessary to achieving leadership status. This is what I hear from the HR managers, right? The folks that are getting promoted to the C-suite have executive presence, but the ones who stall out do not. That is why people are seeking coaching in this area. Well, here's the good news. Executive presence can be learned. I've worked with senior folks with exactly this quandary. They have all the technical skills and people like them. They're likable. People are rooting for them, but they're missing this magical executive presence. I remember coaching a senior partner at a consulting firm who had this exact experience. And after I worked with him for about 2 months, he started to feel more confident, but also, at least as importantly, he started getting comments from others about his improved confidence and his presence. So, what exactly is this executive presence? One of the most common definitions that you'll hear is from an author named Sylvia Ann Hewlett. She says, executive presence is a set of qualities that enable leaders to inspire confidence in others. In her research, Sylvia highlights three ingredients that comprise executive presence. 1, communication skills, as in public speaking, body language, and so on. 2, gravitas, as in confidence, integrity, unflappability. And 3, appearance. In other words, how you show up. When I read this list of 3 ingredients, I thought, oh, good. This is all about communication. Of course, there's communication skills, she says, but also gravitas and appearance. And to me, all of these things are communication. And the good news again is communication can be learned. So we can think of executive presence in terms of Hewlett's definition. Executive presence is a set of qualities that enable leaders to inspire confidence in others. And you can also think of it specifically in terms of these 3 ingredients. She highlights these ingredients as communication skills, gravitas, and appearance. Now, before I go on, I also want to clarify what executive presence is not. First of all, executive presence is not a title. In other words, you don't need to be in the C-suite to have executive presence. And actually, not everyone in the C-suite has executive presence. Of course, if you do have it, you're more likely to ascend the corporate ladder. But executive presence does not equal title or status. Executive presence is also different from expertise. I mean expertise as in technical skills. Of course, expertise is also something that we need to succeed in our careers. But executive presence is very different from expertise. What I often observe is that people who come to me for coaching, they often have technical expertise and they're looking to brush up on their executive presence. So executive presence is not the same as status, and it's not the same as expertise. It's also different from charisma. Charisma is more about energy and emotional impact. Charisma can help boost your executive presence, but I would say executive presence is broader. Charisma is about attracting and energizing people. It's often associated with extrovertedness. On the other hand, executive presence is about substance plus delivery, and you definitely do not need to be an expert to have executive presence. That said, I've noticed that many people conflate executive presence with extroversion. This is just wrong. And this isn't the only issue that I've been hearing and reading about executive presence. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that the term executive presence turns many people off altogether. I have a masterclass that I run a few times a year focused on, you guessed it, developing executive presence and your personal brand. And more than a few times, I've had to carefully define with people exactly what I mean and what I don't mean when I say executive presence. Generally, it seems that some people are legitimately turned off when they're told that they need to develop executive presence because it often feels like vague, coded feedback that's used to block their promotion. And this happens especially to women and racialized people. More than once, I've heard people say that when they hear the term executive presence, an image of General Electric's or GE's former CEO Jack Welch comes to mind, along with what they see as his direct, non-inclusive, formal, authoritarian leadership style. Nowadays, our celebrated leaders are authentic. Yes, I said it, the A word. And inclusive. I guess that's the I word. Importantly, today's celebrated leaders are listening to learn, not narrow-minded and authoritarian. For all of these reasons, I suggest that we change the term from executive presence to leadership presence. Executive presence is just too loaded. Leadership presence is something that many of us aspire to. This term leadership presence might just be more ethical and better for business outcomes. It can also be used in contexts outside of the executive boardroom, like with the other professionals I coach, leaders in medicine, leaders in law, and so on. They don't call themselves executives, but they do aspire to leadership. So what do you think? Let's call it leadership presence. Now, what I'd love to share with you is my model for developing leadership presence. This model is based on my reading of books and articles on, yes, executive presence, plus my observations from coaching hundreds of professionals, thousands if you include the corporate workshops that I run. It's a framework that I illustrate as a hierarchy. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see this hierarchy on the screen. If you're listening, you can easily download the framework if you go to talkabouttalk.com/leadership presence. That's talkabouttalk.com/leadership presence. Yes, I made it easy for you, of course. So whether you're looking at the framework right now or not, I can describe it to you. At the bottom of the hierarchy, we have foundational communication skills. Things like body language, storytelling, listening, communicating with precision, vocal presence. I call this foundational communication skills, not because they're easy. In fact, folks with true leadership presence often go back and revisit these foundational communication skills to elevate their leadership presence. But I call them foundational because they're at the bottom. And here's what my clients tell me. When we've been doing some work to elevate or improve their foundational communication skills, they start to feel confident. And they're often told that they appear more confident by others. So this makes up the next level of the hierarchy, confidence. Again, this is both confidence in terms of how you feel and how you're perceived. The interesting thing about this level is that there's a couple different ways of elevating your confidence. As I said, you can do so by improving your communication skills. You can also directly improve your confidence by doing things like learning about imposter syndrome and how to overcome it. You can also learn mindsets and tactics that are specifically focused on elevating your confidence. Things like slow, deep breathing, things like expansive body language, and things like positive self-talk. These are all tactics that can directly boost your confidence. So here, we're ready for the next step. We've started with our foundational communication skills. we've experienced improved confidence, once we are feeling more confident and we're being perceived as more confident, this is when we start to establish credibility. Again, there are things that we can do to directly boost our credibility. I've got 3 ideas. 1, focus on developing your personal brand. 2, focus on demonstrating leadership. And 3, focus on your influence. So let me go into a little bit of detail about each of these. First, focusing on establishing your unique personal brand. Notice the term unique. As I said at the beginning, one of the criticisms of this executive presence notion is that some people believe it means conforming to a stereotype of what a leader should look like. Personal branding is the opposite of this. The way I coach personal branding, it's about identifying, articulating, and reinforcing your unique brand, your unique strengths and passions. So this is the opposite of conforming. It's about standing out as your true, unique, and best self. So that's one way that you can really help establish your credibility. The second is by demonstrating leadership. When I coach people on demonstrating leadership, I often share with them that the obvious way to demonstrate leadership is to be a good people leader, right? That's where our mind goes to when we hear the word leader. But don't forget, there are many, many ways to demonstrate leadership. Consider, for example, just being proactive, being the person who comes up with the innovative and creative ideas. If you think about it, leaders lead. They are out front and proactive. So be proactive and people will see you as a leader. There's also strategic leadership. The leaders that we admire are strategic thinkers, right? They're identifying and then reinforcing strategy. They think strategically. So there's people leadership, there's proactive leadership, there's strategic leadership, there's also thought leadership. What area do you have expertise in where you want to share your thought leadership? Privately inside your organization and even publicly on social media and beyond. So thought leadership. And then the last thing that I share with my clients who I'm working with on demonstrating leadership is simply using the word lead. Use the word lead, led, leadership, leader, especially when you're referencing yourself, and people will start to think of you as a leader as well. Okay, so we're still at this almost at the top of our leadership presence hierarchy. We're at the credibility stage, and we've talked about developing your personal brand. We've talked about demonstrating leadership. The third way that you can reinforce your credibility is by focusing on influence. This is about negotiating and making an impact. This is about being heard. If you think about it, this is all about effective communication skills and confidence too. Do you see how all the layers reinforce themselves? So now you see how this leadership presence hierarchy works. Again, we start with the foundational communication skills, and as we improve our communication skills, we start to feel and be perceived as more confident. There are things we can do to further improve our confidence, and that's when we start to establish credibility. Again, there are ways that we can reinforce our credibility. Personal brand, demonstrating leadership, and working on our influence. Once we've done all of these things, we reach the apex or the top of the leadership presence hierarchy, which I label as impact. What that impact is personal for you. It could be getting a new job. It could be getting a promotion. It might simply be being heard in meetings when you're at work. You can achieve impact when you have leadership presence. And that's it for this episode. I hope you're feeling a little bit more informed and inspired to develop leadership presence. Now, I have an ask. 2 asks, actually. First, please hit subscribe. Wherever you're listening, whether it's Spotify or Apple or YouTube, wherever you are, please hit subscribe. And then you won't miss any of the communication skills coaching tips that you get from me and Talk About Talk every 2 weeks. My second ask is that you share this episode with a friend. Do you have a friend who might benefit from these insights on executive presence and leadership presence? Spread the word. Thank you so much, and thank you for listening. Talk soon.